Good evening. You're watching London Live News at 6 with Tanya Francis as we continue our special coverage of the late Queen's death and the introduction of a new King of England. Tonight we will look at how the capital has been preparing for the Queen's coffin returning to Buckingham Palace and the days leading up to the funeral as we begin to see scenes similar to those from Edinburgh now starting here in London. Thousands lining the streets with hopes to pay tribute to the Queen as she is set to lie in state in less than 24 hours. First tonight, let's just remind you of what's been happening today as the Queen's coffin was flown from Edinburgh back to her home here in London in Buckingham Palace for the night. The coffin left St Giles Cathedral at 5 p.m. and was flown to RAF Northolt. The journey then began from there to Buckingham Palace, where the King, the Queen Consort and other royals will be there to receive it. The coffin will pass by Lancaster Gate, Marble Arch, down Park Lane and past Hyde Park Corner before arriving at the palace, with thousands of mourners expected to line the streets of the capital to view the Queen's coffin along the route. Well, now the Queen's coffin is back in the capital for the first time since her death. We are less than 24 hours away from the procession which will lead the coffin from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall, where she will lie in state. Well, James is here with me to talk through the next few days. Firstly, let's look to tomorrow. James, how is that shaping up?
Well, let's start by looking at tomorrow by looking at some of these scenes from this morning. This was perhaps our first glimpse of what tomorrow will look like in terms of pageantry for when the Queen's coffin is brought, as you say, to Westminster Hall from Buckingham Palace, starting at 2:22 p.m. at the palace. This was a rehearsal by the household division in the early hours of this morning before sunrise, giving us an indication of how it will look and the route as well, as it will pass the Mall, Horse Guards Road, across Horse Guards Parade and onto Whitehall to Parliament Square and finally into the Palace of Westminster. The coffin carried by a gun carriage of the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, and it will be followed by the King himself as well as other royals as well. This journey is estimated to take around 38 minutes, and this footage here also gives a little hint of the soundtrack we expect to accompany the moments as it moves through the city. Well,
what's not on show there is that tomorrow we can't say for sure, but there's a high likelihood that there are going to be thousands of people lining the streets. From what I saw when I was out around Westminster Hall yesterday, many barriers being set up to manage those queues and those number of people. But do we have any more indication as to what's this going to look like tomorrow in terms of managing that number of people?
Yes, we do. There will be, as you say, lots of barriers, lots of security in place, whether you can see those security or not. Firstly, a dedicated ceremonial viewing areas will be set up along the route to allow the public, of course, to pay their respects. Have a look online if you want to get down to those checkpoints. They will open at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning with limited capacity, so you'll have to be quick. However, the official guidance warns to not wait or camp in advance of that. So don't head down there with your tent and your sleeping bag now, because you might be told to move along. There will be security, as I said, at all the sites, and no alcohol is allowed as you stand along the side at those sites. Food and drink can be brought though, and there will be concession stands and toilets and all that sort of thing for people to refresh themselves as they wait, which could be a very long wait.
And I guess that's really important to note, because we are hearing that the number of hours that people could be waiting is changing sort of by the minute. And what about those, like the thousands of people that we saw in Edinburgh in the last 24 hours who would perhaps like to have their moment with the late Queen's coffin?
Yeah, well, as you said at the start, the Queen's coffin will lie in state from 5 p.m. at Westminster Hall until 6:30 a.m. on the Monday, of course, the day of the funeral itself. Now, people have already started queuing for that along the river as early as yesterday, so that's 48 hours until the official queue technically opens tomorrow. That line will stretch from Parliament's tourist entrance at Cromwell Green, down Millbank, past the Lords and Victoria Tower Gardens, across Lambeth Bridge, and that will loop then back north on the other side of the river past the COVID Memorial Wall. You won't be moving anywhere near as fast as this footage, though, I can assure you. We have heard from some of those early birds that have set up, by the river. Let's take a look.
My old mom died 2010. I still cry. So anyone you lose your mom, whether the mom is 1,000 years or 100 years or whatever age she is, she's your mom. She's the one who brought you to the earth. So if she goes away, whether you are also 100 years, you still feel that you lost some part of your body. So when I heard that she's dead, I was really, really upset, very, very upset.
Met Her Majesty on the occasion of her 90th birthday at Windsor when I gave her the balloons. She had a royal walkabout in Windsor.
Your Majesty, Mummy, I find it very hard to believe that you have reached your 90th year. And I suddenly realized the other day that I've known you since you were 22 years old.
The last actual walkabout ever, and I presented her with 2 balloons, my sister and I, and unfortunately the 9 flew away.
Is that you?
Yeah, and my pants were falling down. Look, I was running all over Windsor to get the 9. And
So when was this?
In 2016, and suddenly, out of the blue, it appeared. A 9 appeared. So don't ask me. I think it was Prince Harry got a shop to open, blow up the 9 and deliver it. And when the Queen came, she said, "Oh my God, you've got the 9 back." And I said, "Yes, Your Majesty, I've been running all round Windsor. I nearly lost my pantaloons."
Amazing.
Look, she's killing herself laughing. Look, my trousers, I have my tracksuit on underneath because it was freezing.
So it's safe to say she means a lot to you.
Oh, she was a wonderful lady.
I mean, that's really true dedication. We'll hear a little bit later in the show about this real sense of shared and collective grief, which many of these people will be feeling, and this is testament to them being down there this early on.
Yeah.
The queue is expected to be quite something. Yesterday, there were early reports it could be 10 to 20 hours. That seems to be a whole lot more now.
Ish. People are expected to be in it for hours, no doubt, potentially queuing overnight, with little opportunity to sit down as well. That's another thing, as the queue will be constantly moving. Even though you'll be in it, as you say, for hours, it will be constantly moving. So don't bring any chairs or anything, because you'll be constantly picking them up and moving yourself along. One newspaper has predicted there could be around 750,000 people making their way into Westminster Hall to catch a glimpse of the Queen's coffin, draped in the royal flag, of course. Expect tight airport security, as we already know. No phones, no cameras, nothing like that. You will be taken off you if you try and take a picture, so it is just to pay your respects. So you won't be allowed any electrical items in there, or any chairs or hampers that you've brought along to carry food. And you mentioned time. Some are predicting averaging around 12 hours wait for when you can start to get in there.
I guess it's worth to mention here and to remind everyone that this is something that's going to be open 24 hours a day. So we will see those queues and perhaps fluctuations in those times throughout the night. But really, who knows? Let's talk about travel then, because if there are as many as 750,000 people that are going to be in that area in Westminster, I can imagine that that's going to have an impact on the area being able to move freely and also the transport network.
Yeah, unprecedented levels of people will be in the capital. Not my words, the words of all the transport bosses who have been looking ahead to all of this. The Rail Delivery Group, which represents all the train companies, have said services to London and the capital stations will be extremely busy, and they must prepare well in advance of when they leave. leaving plenty of time before you're going to head off from your house, because who knows what to expect. There may be a lot of short-term changes that can just come at you like that. It's going to be a difficult day for the network, one they say that they will cope with. Andy Byford, the TfL's Transport Commissioner, said there may be short notice changes, as I mentioned, and diversions with necessary road closures as well. It's important that the roads will be a nightmare as well for buses and things like that. And when it comes to the tubes, some underground stations may temporarily close on a whim to cope with the logistical demands of the day. Also, people have been told to avoid Green Park tube station if possible, obviously the closest to the kind of route, and instead try and use Victoria Piccadilly Circus or St James's Park. Some services will run for 24 hours a day, so there will be some night tubes and night trains on some routes. However, it won't be as frequent as the normal service in the day. One other good positive bit of news is the Elizabeth line will run on Sunday for the first time since it opened, 12 trains an hour as well. The bottom line is with all of this, Tanya, just check before you travel, check before you leave your house, and my advice, not official advice, but wear comfy shoes, your comfiest shoes, if you are going to join that queue, because you will be in it for some time.
Yes, James, I think that's some great advice. I think in general, go prepared if that's with comfortable shoes, snacks, checking the travel before you go. James, thank you. James there with the latest on how the capital is shaping up. It looks to be very busy as the Queen returns home to lie in state at Westminster Hall. Now, the Mayor of London paid tribute to the Queen today as he led proceedings at City Hall. He recalled his childhood memories of the Queen and said she was a shining force that bound us all together.
The outpouring of grief, sorrow and affection that we've witnessed since the devastating news reached us of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's passing shows how many lives she touched with her singular grace and powerful example of duty and dignity.
And if you're in London and want to find a way to pay tribute to the late Queen, we have some ideas of how you might want to do that.
If you wish to find a way to pay tribute to the Queen, here are some of the options for Londoners. From Thursday the 15th of September, the Queen's body will lie in state in Westminster Hall for 4 days. It is expected that hundreds of thousands of mourners will be able to file past her coffin. Buckingham Palace has also set up sites in Green Park and Hyde Park where you can leave flowers, and places of worship are also offering the opportunity to light candles and lay floral tributes. Many local authorities have set up books of condolences in libraries, town halls and other buildings.
There you have it, just a few ideas of how you might want to say your final goodbyes to the late Queen. Right, let's give you an update on the weather now. Rain is expected overnight and it could become heavy at times with the odd rumble of thunder, and overnight lows of about 16 degrees. Wednesday back up to about 23 degrees, starting off cloudy with sunny patches as we head into the afternoon. Thursday and much of the rest of the week will be cloudier and cooler, but as we head into the weekend, we might see the sun poking its head through and temperatures sticking around 17 degrees. We are taking a break, but we will be back with more on this special coverage following the death of Her Majesty the Queen. See you shortly.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News, where we'll be continuing our special coverage of the Queen's death. But first, let's just bring you some other headlines from across the capital. The family of Chris Kaba have said the firearms officer who killed him should have been suspended from duty sooner. The officer fired a single shot at the 24-year-old rapper who was unarmed on Streatham Hill on the 5th of September. Well, the Independent Office for Police Conduct have opened a homicide inquiry and suspended the officer, which Mr. Kaba's family have welcomed, saying there was no original urgency around the investigation. The Met Police have said the suspension will not determine the outcome of the IOPC investigation, which is still ongoing. A teenager has been jailed following a fatal stabbing in West London. The 16-year-old boy was sentenced to 13 years in prison for the manslaughter of 15-year-old Jallan Woods-Bell in Hayes. Well, Jallan was found with stab injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. The defendant claims it was in self-defense, but eyewitnesses have said that he was carrying a large knife in a gloved hand when Jallan was unarmed. The arrests of a number of protesters following the death of Queen Elizabeth II are deeply concerning. This is according to free speech campaigners. Well, arrests happen in Scotland and Oxford at events to mark the Queen's death and the proclamation of the new king. A 22-year-old was charged for breaching the peace after Prince Andrew was heckled as he walked behind the hearse. Well, the Met have said thousands of officers are required to make a historic week like this as safe as possible, but agreed that the public have the right to protest. On to a bit of sport now, and Tottenham are currently playing in their away Champions League match against Sporting Lisbon. The North London club are looking for a win which would take them to the top of their group, but with all Premier League games being postponed last weekend out of respect for the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Spurs boss Antonio Conte has said that the league made an important decision in a time of great sadness and travelled himself to Buckingham Palace to pay his respects to the Queen.
I'm living this atmosphere in London, and on Friday I went to Buckingham Palace. Yeah, and like a normal person, because I'm a normal person with the hat, and to live, to live this situation, because I think this for sure we'll remember this for the rest of our life. Then football has to go ahead, and we'll do it. But I think Premier League made an important decision to stop football and show great respect for the death of the Queen. Yeah.
Well, that was Antonio Conte there, and Tottenham's game against Leicester on Saturday is still due to go ahead at 5:30. On the subject of sport, it's just been announced that Londoner Anthony Joshua has accepted the terms put forward for a fight against Tyson Fury, and that should be happening in December. Now, as the nation continues to mourn the loss of the late Queen, Londoners will now have the opportunity to have their moment with her as the coffin arrives in the capital today. Well, Dr. Rachel Taylor is a neuropsychologist who's here to speak about grieving publicly, grieving for someone that you don't personally know, and the notion of grieving collectively. Well, Dr. Rachel, it's lovely to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about what really is, a very sensitive and difficult subject that many people will be experiencing very differently at the moment. Let's start by talking about this notion of collective grief. Does it feel or manifest differently to that if you were grieving in a more sort of intimate family and friends environment?
I think, grief is a universal emotion. It's a universal sort of mechanism. So this sort of the collective grief is when you can feel somebody else's emotion and it amplifies your own. Now, the brain is really clever. The nervous system is really clever in that we have the ability to feel empathy for other people. So we have mirror neuron systems. So if we see somebody else who is in pain, who is grieving, we are able to sort of feel what they're feeling, and this is a very human trait. So it's on varying degrees. So we can look at someone and we can see that they're grieving, and we will be moved to help them, we'll be moved to support them, we'll be moved to do something to try and relieve them of whatever pain they're going through. So it's people forget that human beings are the most social of animals, and we work better together. So we are sort of hardwired to be able to deal with, loss and death and life and everything in between. So this is part of human processes.
And she's very much been seen, the late Queen, as sort of the nation's gran, I think is something that I heard that I thought was quite endearing. With that in mind, why is it that people are feeling this sort of immense pain and grief for someone that they've never actually even met personally before? It's a really interesting sentiment that people are feeling right now.
When we have attachment, it's not that grief and loss is like a mechanism by itself. It's as a response, to having love and attachment. So whatever people are feeling, it's just a mark of what part the Queen played in their life, what sort of association, what meaning they placed on that. But also, people will probably be thinking about losses that they have personally had, and it will be bringing all those emotions and all those feelings up. Because when we have got memories of loss, when we are seeing scenes which are going to trigger certain emotions in us, we will remember all of that as well. So it's not just the grieving for the Queen, it's all the grief and loss that person has had throughout life.
Yes, you're right. It can be a very triggering time for people. You know, grief is grief regardless of who you're grieving. In your professional opinion, you know, many people might be experiencing this collective grief for someone that they don't know for the first time. What would your advice be to people who are grieving collectively? What can they do sort of over the next coming days and weeks? Obviously, with the funeral coming up on Monday, that being quite a pivotal and difficult day for many people.
So the first thing that I want people to actually remember is that they will be in shock, regardless of whether you are a total royalist, you know, with all the memorabilia everywhere, or somebody who just listens to the Queen's speech. Everybody was shocked to hear the news on Thursday, you know, whether it was a shock that was, oh, wow, and then move on, or a shock who's like, oh my goodness, everything's going to change now. So we have to recognize that. And the next thing then leading on from that is that we have to be kind. We're all going to do it in different ways, and we all have to accept we've had a lot of trauma in the past 2 years as a country and worldwide, and people are still feeling that. For the Queen to go, it's going to mean a lot of change for a lot of people, and we have to be kind about that. And we have to ask people what they need and ask ourselves, what do we need?
Now, the Royal Guard had the job of protecting the Queen at her various castles and palaces. There are 5 regiments: the Grenadier, Coldstream, Scots, Irish and the Welsh Guards. Well, 84-year-old Colin Bully joined the Welsh Guards to undertake his national service. He gave us his reaction to the news as well as his memories of the Queen.
I was a guardsman, and I used to have to guard the Queen at Buckingham Palace and at St James's Palace, and at the Bank of England in those days we used to guard. And I went to Purbright Barracks for my training, and then 8 months later I came out, and that's when I went to Buckingham Palace to guard the Queen. Only saw her when she come by in a car, when we used to present arms. But she would always say good morning or good night or whatever part of the day it was if she was going out through the gates. Because I was there for 5 years, and I didn't go straight into looking after, you know, the Queen. I mean, I just developed that as my service went on. The Duke was good, yes. He'd always come into the sergeant's mess, and he said, I'd rather go in the sergeant's mess with the real people and go in the officers' mess. So that's where he used to come on. He used to come on a Saturday morning normally.
How did you find wearing the outfit?
Oh, marvellous. Used to feel wonderful in it, in that red and beautiful buttons, and yeah, marvellous. Used to really like that. Perks of the job, especially when you were outside the palace. Because nowadays we used to march outside. They believe they march inside now, but we used to march outside, from post to post.
What do you think of King Charles?
Oh, I think he's marvellous. I think he's terrific, and he'll do a terrific job. I remember him being born, and when he was little, running around in the St James's Palace and all that. I remember him very well.
How did you feel when you heard the news on?
Oh, I was broken-hearted. I was. I just remembered of when I was up there, and it was years ago, but it sort of got to me a bit, you know, because we were sworn in to look after her, and we loved her. All of us loved her dearly.
Well, that was Colin Bully there, looking back on his time serving in the Welsh Guard here in the capital. You're watching London Live News with Tanya Francis. And the next part of the show will remind you of the events of the day as King Charles awaits the arrival of his mother's coffin back here in London as she returns to Buckingham Palace for the last time.
From From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello and welcome back. You're watching London Live News as we continue our special coverage of the royal family and how the UK and now London are preparing for the state funeral of the late Queen. Her coffin is back in the capital for the first time since her death. We're less than 24 hours away from the procession, which will lead the coffin from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall, where she will lie in state. Well, early reports are saying queues to get into the hall could be up to 12 hours long, with people already out on the streets hoping to get a chance to pay their final respects. Well, we've been speaking to some of those people.
I was a freelance butler and I used to do the royal boxes for the Queen for many years. So yeah, thought I'd come along and join in and obviously pay my respects to the Queen for the duty she's given to this country for all these years.
My old mom died 2010. I still cry. So anyone you lose your mom, whether the mom is 1,000 years or 100 years or whatever age she is, she's your mom. She's the one who brought you to the earth. So if she goes away, whether you are also 100 years, you still feel that you lost some part of your body. So when I heard that she's dead, I was really, really upset, very, very upset.
Met Her Majesty on the occasion of her 90th birthday at Windsor when I gave her the balloons. We had a royal walkabout in Windsor.
Your Majesty, Mummy, I find it very hard to believe that you have reached your 90th year. And I suddenly realized the other day that I've known you since you were 22 years old.
The last actual walkabout ever, and I presented her with 2 balloons, my sister and I, and unfortunately the 9 flew away.
Is that you?
Yeah, and my pants were falling down. Look, I was running all over Windsor to get the 9.
So when was this? In
2016, and suddenly, out of the blue, it appeared. A 9 appeared. So don't ask me, I think it was Prince Harry got a shop to open, blow up the 9 and deliver it. And when the Queen came, she said, "Oh my God, you've got the 9 back." And I said, "Yes, Your Majesty, I've been running all round Windsor. I nearly lost my pantaloons."
Amazing.
Look, she's killing herself laughing. Look, my trousers, I have my tracksuit on underneath because it was freezing.
So it's safe to say she means a lot to you.
Oh, she was a wonderful lady.
Now, the Mayor of London paid tribute to the Queen today as he led proceedings at City Hall. He recalled his childhood memories of the Queen and said she was a shining force that bound us all together.
The outpouring of grief, sorrow and affection that we've witnessed since the devastating news reached us of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's passing shows how many lives she touched with her singular grace and powerful example of duty and dignity.
Now, when it comes to special insight into how Monday's funeral will look, we've been speaking to funeral directors with a special royal heritage. The organisers of Queen Victoria, George VI and Edward VII funerals, CPJ Field, spoke with James about the logistical task that the Queen's funeral will present, as well as the importance of making it feel like an inclusive event for the millions watching around the world and those who've made the trip to the Abbey.
We have been royal funeral directors, conducting and helping to arrange the funerals of Queen Victoria and others. So we have, as a family, sadly not in my living memory, but nonetheless within the records of our company, been involved in state funerals in the past.
Tell us a little bit about how much organisation then is involved in that, because we already see what's happening at Buckingham Palace at the moment. It's such a mammoth task because so many people will be coming down next Monday.
Absolutely. There are so many parallels for everyone, really. You don't get any particular notice of the need to arrange a funeral, and we do arrange them in such a short period of time, and there are lots of decisions. I think the blessing for the royal family and the royal household at the moment is that preparations for Operation London Bridge, as it's known, have been in place for a long time. So many of the aspects of personalisation and little bits of involvement and who's going to be involved have been set out for a period of time. I think there'll be confidence, but equally a state ceremonial event of this magnitude put on in a very, very short period of time is bound to come with its own amount of pressure.
Yeah. What are the key things that need to be got right in many ways? What needs to go well?
Gosh, I think if I was able to put my finger so succinctly onto what that is. Perhaps I might have had a tap on the shoulder by now, but I think it's what I find particularly fascinating is the layers to the whole thing. You can't help but see the family aspect right at the heart of all of this. There are sons and daughters and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who need to come to terms with their own grief and need that start to the grieving process that funerals are. And then, of course, we've got all the constitutional stuff going on at the same time that the Queen's son is going through how he feels about what's happening and the loss of his mother. At the same time, we're going through amazing things like the accession meeting we all saw on Saturday morning. So I think it's about recognizing that they have the people there that they want to have there. They have their own private aspects to the ceremony as well, which hopefully will give them the opportunity to say the things that they feel they need to say, feel the things that they need to feel, as well as being on show for the big show too.
Yeah, because it's important. It's going to be an incredibly poignant moment for the whole country. Many people will go down there, of course. Millions will be watching it on TV, perhaps billions around the world. That you get the balance right between allowing that personal grief, but also allowing the public in close enough so that they can feel a part of such a momentous day. Absolutely, and that's the third layer, isn't it? The need for all of us to say thank you, to say what she's meant to us, and it's been amazing to hear people say that she feels like a grandmother to so many of us as well. So we also have a need, and the people heading to Buckingham Palace, I'm going to make my own trip tomorrow because I feel the need to gather, to be together and mark what's going on as well, even though I am many layers removed from the family right at the heart of what's going on.
Well, that's a little insight into what we may expect from Monday's funeral. Monday, the 19th of September, is the official state funeral. You're watching London Live News. We'll remind you of the events of the day as the Queen's coffin leaves Edinburgh and makes its way to Buckingham Palace. See you shortly.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello and welcome back to this special coverage of the monarchy following the death of Queen Elizabeth on Thursday last week. After 70 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth II became a part of our everyday lives. We are used to seeing her portrait and royal crest on our televisions, food items and coins. But this is all about to change. There are 29 billion coins in circulation in the UK that have the Queen's head on them, and we will soon begin a lengthy process of changing that from a face of our Queen to one of our King. Well, Dominic Chorney, an ancient coin specialist, spoke to me earlier about what this might look like.
I think we have to look to the past to get some indication of what may happen. The Queen's father, King George VI, he died in February of 1952, and it was by the autumn that the new portrait of Queen Elizabeth was created. That went out as a sort of competition to see which was the best design, and the Royal Mint picked the portrait by Mary Gillick, very, very popular portrait of the Queen. But it took time to get that process in motion.
Yeah, I have no doubt that it's going to be a lengthy process. You mentioned there that it was kind of, there was one chosen. Is there any indication as to how this new coin might be chosen? Will it be the royal household that does it? Will he sit for a portrait? What does that look like? What's happening behind the doors at the moment, if you have any indication as to what that could look like?
We really don't at the moment, but I think it's very interesting. Charles is quite traditional, so I think the King may decide to have his portrait taken from life. The last portrait of the Queen wasn't actually taken from life. Jodie Clark's 2015 portrait was actually engraved on a computer. It was created using existing photographs and imagery of the Queen, which the designer rather wonderfully created this new portrait with. But the Queen never actually sat for the design. She did for her previous 4 portraits. So that'll be interesting to see whether King Charles decides to have his portrait taken from life.
And will there be any notable differences that we will see between the coins that Queen Elizabeth II did and those ones that King Charles will do? Obviously, it will be a different face on there, but as for the rest of it, will that look any different?
It certainly will. I think we know almost for certain that, well, we have a tradition in Britain of coins going back hundreds of years where the portrait of the monarch faces a different direction to the previous monarch. And I've got 2 coins here, one of George VI and one of Queen Elizabeth. And you can see that King George VI's portrait is facing left, while the portrait of the Queen is facing right. And this is a tradition that, like I say, goes back many, many years. And I think it's almost certain that we'll see portraits of Charles, King Charles III, facing the opposite direction. So he'll probably be looking left.
Going back to the left. And how long will we see the current set of currency that we have? How long is that likely to continue in circulation for? There are billions of coins with her face on it. That's not something that's going to happen overnight or in a year or 2 from now.
No, I think it'll be interesting to see what efforts the Treasury really makes in withdrawing the existing coins. I imagine they'll be circulating for decades. Previous generations may remember using the pre-decimal currency, and in that currency you may have even seen coins of Queen Victoria. You know, in the 60s and the 50s and the 40s, you definitely have had coins of George V and George VI circulating alongside. So this will be the first time that more recent generations will see more than one monarch in circulation.
It's a really good point you make, because her reign was so long, for 70 years, many of us have only ever known her. And so it's a really interesting process as to how we are going to change. You talked there a little bit about the evolution of the coin and of the currency. Some major changes happened under her reign. Talk to me a little bit more about that and how we went from sort of one currency to another.
In the late 1960s and 1970s, we went through a transition called decimalisation. Before that, Britain's currency was one of pounds, shillings and pence, or old money. And then it was decided really that that wasn't suitable for the modern era. So the decision was taken to decimalise the currency. And in 1971, decimal day occurred. The coins were switched from the old pounds, shillings and pence to pence and pounds. And you can see these decimal booklets that were given to pretty much every family in the country, almost like a passport for the coinage, and all, of course, with Queen Elizabeth's portrait.
So a guide of sorts as to how to change from one to the other?
Yeah, people were confused. They didn't know how they were going to switch from a system where there were 240 pence to the pound suddenly to one with 100. So the new coins sort of mirrored the previous ones, and they did circulate alongside for a little bit. But it was a real upheaval in the currency, and one that took a lot of getting used to for some people.
Yes, and just looking at these coins, the ones that are so familiar and soon will have a new face on them. People are probably thinking, oh, I'd like to have a memory of our Queen and her face on our coin. What's that going to look like? With so many coins in circulation, are there certain ones that perhaps will have more of a sentimental value? I don't know, perhaps ones around big events, the special coins. What should people be looking out for when wanting to have something special to remember her? Well,
I imagine almost any coin of Queen Elizabeth's reign, people can keep and save. I mean, people collect things like the 50 pences at the moment. Those will have a whole new meaning now, especially coins from this year. But, values aside, I think, I'm sure the Mint will be issuing some sort of commemorative set for when Charles becomes king, presumably a coronation set or something along those lines. But yeah, I think people will just naturally, pick coins out of their change. And also, like we say, the coins of Queen Elizabeth will be circulating probably for decades, so she'll always be with us in the currency, whether or not we decide to actually collect anything.
There we are, some insight there into the changes to our currency and coins, and when we might expect to see those happening. Now, as the nation mourns the death of the Queen, many have taken this time to reflect on her life, her loves and passions, the things that she achieved over the last 7 decades. Well, having begun riding at the age of 3, the Queen's love of horses has been well documented. Let's find out more. Alicia has this report.
Horses were one of the Queen's lifelong loves. Whether it was racing thoroughbreds or ponies, she showed an unfailing interest. If one of her horses was running, the Queen would be watching. Her introduction came at the age of 2, when in the autumn of 1928 she accompanied her parents to Northamptonshire for the hunting season. From early childhood, she was surrounded by horses, and relatives who owned, rode and talked about them. Elizabeth became a keen rider. When she was 5, her mother led her on Peggy, a Shetland pony given to her when she was 4 by King George V. In 1938, riding instructor Horace Smith began giving Elizabeth and her sister Margaret twice-weekly lessons at the palace. The Queen went on to breed and race horses for more than 60 years. In 2013, the Queen's horse Estimate claimed victory in Royal Ascot's Gold Cup, the first in the race's 207-year history that had been won by a reigning monarch. The Queen was delighted and clapped her hands in excitement as she watched the race. In November 2014, Queen Elizabeth II was given a Lifetime Achievement Award for her devotion to equestrian sport, with the organisation behind the prize saying, "The bond between the Queen and her horses is truly extraordinary."
There we are, remembering not only her love of corgis, but also her lifelong love of horses, and in fact, horse racing as well. Over the last few days, historians have been talking about her life and have even suggested that if the Queen wasn't the Queen, there is a high chance that she would have chosen to be a horse trainer. But moving on now, let's give you a short update on the weather now. Rain is expected overnight, and it could become heavy at times with the odd rumble of thunder and overnight lows of 16 degrees. Well, Wednesday, high of 23 degrees, starting off cloudy, but the sun will poke through by the end of the day. Thursday will be much the same, cloudier and cooler, but as we head into the weekend, it's looking a bit nicer and brighter, with temperatures staying around 17 degrees. Well, we are coming to the end of the hour. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with more coverage as the Queen's coffin is taken to Westminster Hall to lie in state. And the public, we will have the chance to go and say our final goodbyes. We are going to end tonight's special coverage with music from the London Symphony Orchestra, who played the national anthem in honour of the late Queen. We'll see you tomorrow.